Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fourth session of Beryl's International Women's Day series. I'm really excited to be here today and to be chatting to an amazing group of women. They all come from different backgrounds and have different journeys, but they all are now in leadership positions within the tech or the mobility industry. And today we're going to be hearing a little bit about their personal journeys and discussing what can we do to nurture and empower more women to become leaders too. So let's get started and let's welcome Jenny.
Hi,
Hello.
Michelle. Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you for inviting me to sit on this panel. I'm very excited to see where the discussion takes us and to sit alongside some brilliant women sharing their stories. To introduce myself, full name Jenny Gladman. I am a director of Brightsmith, which is a clean tech executive search firm. Not only do we focus on the societal and environmental challenges that we're facing and how to tackle those through talent, we also have a big focus on diversity and inclusion, so building a diverse community and also providing a platform for specifically women, very often shining a light on the brilliant work that they're doing in the sector and providing role models for those who are interested in getting into the sector or who already may be in it and are looking to further their career and move into managerial roles.
Perfect, thank you. And let's welcome now Sarah.
Hi, really excited to be here. My name's Sarah Naniakara. I'm the director of Nth Level Consulting. I'm an accredited coach and facilitator. I'm also one of Brené Brown's global ambassadors, and I'm the trustee for Women of Colour Cycling Collective.
Perfect, brilliant. And let's welcome Nikki now. Hello.
Hello, lovely to be here. Thanks, Michelle, and hello to all of you. I'm Nikki. I lead the London, Tokyo and Lisbon studios of Us2, which is a digital product studio, probably most famously known as the makers of Monument Valley, but we actually work with brands like The Co-op, Harvey Nichols, Google, Barclays, and a whole array, creating interesting user-centered products. And I'm also a non-exec director of Innovate Her and a co-founder of Ada's List, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Perfect, welcome. And Romy, welcome as well.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to this chat. Very excited to be here. I'm the VP People of Tier Mobility, a leading micromobility provider, and my career basically started in the corporate world where I was responsible for building up in a very traditional corporate organization the diversity management for them with focus on gender diversity. And afterwards, to make a real direct impact, I moved into the startup world, and I've been there for more than 5-6 years now, serving also from an HR perspective, building those organizations or rebuilding them and putting a strong focus on culture and obviously also diversity and inclusion. Yeah, trying to be a sponsor, especially now in Tier Mobility for our Women at Tier initiative, which I very much love, and I'm supporting, like since I started at Tier, I've been supporting them.
Perfect, welcome. And Avi, welcome as well.
Hi Michelle, hi everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me on today. My name is Abby Butler. I'm a Senior Head of Transformation in Business Transformation Team at Sky in the UK. I'm also co-chair of our Gender Equality Network called Women at Sky. So we have around 2,500 network members, and we strive for gender balance within the business.
Perfect, brilliant. It's great to have you all here. Thank you so much for for being here today with us. And before we get started, I just want to remind everyone in the public to feel free to send us any questions as we chat about things, and just feel free to send any questions or comments or things that you would like us to touch on. We do have 15 minutes at the end to discuss any specific things you would like us to chat about. Right, so with all that being said, let's dive deep in. I think we have like 3 really good topics, and within those quite a few interesting themes to touch on. But let's get started, I think, with some figures. And the big question of how are we doing to solve the lack of diversity in leadership teams. So there's been quite a few figures circulating around, especially around now that it's International Women's Day. And we know, for example, that in 2020, 33% of board seats in the top 350 UK listed companies are now being held by women. 34.5% of board seats among the FTSE 100 are also being held by women. And that obviously shows, like a really good progress. But however, when you translate these percentages to actual real numbers, you realize, for example, that 34.5% actually means 324 women have got a seat at that table that we all keep banging about. Again, which points out, improvement has been made, but it's still a lot to be done. So Jenny, to kind of kick off things with you, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the progress we're making is brilliant, but I think we're all in agreement that there's a long way to go to reach full gender equality. And I think one of the things I would like to discuss is how we can use our own voices and our own influence to empower other women, but also to inspire other women to make the leap into leadership. And that could be in any sector. But I think today we focus on a sector which struggles to have gender balance. And that's something that I've felt very passionately about throughout my whole career is how do we attract more women to a sector which historically has been very male dominated? So how can we use our voices and build a platform and a community that invites others to both join it, but then to move through the ranks into the world of female leadership?
Exactly. And I mean, taking, I think, even a step further from the gender conversation and also embracing what diversity really means, which is having that representation of a range of traits, experiences, cultural backgrounds in a company's workforce, and especially on a company, in company's leadership. Sarah, how do you think we're doing there, and what can we be doing to get better?
I love it where we say, oh, we're making progress. Look, we're making progress. And I find it frustrating because the system suits the patriarch, right? So the system suits men, and until the balance of we're in a system of power over, and unless it changes from power over to power to and power within, it's never going to change. The system needs to be readdressed and rebalanced. And we're all vying as women, and in my case women of color, for greater representation and for greater visibility, and we're doing everything that we can to encourage more women to apply for positions. I think there's also something in there about the leadership boards really looking at themselves and readdressing the balance so that they shift it from this power over position to a power to and power within. And if we're going to really see a change, then us women are doing all this work, and I hope that we're seeing a reckoning of a sea change in industries, in mobility, and across industries, that shift away to encourage more diversity at board level. And that means moving out the way. That really does mean making that space. And I think that's the change that needs to happen. We can do everything that we can as women of colour, but unless society agrees that we need to make that shift, that's when it will really happen.
Yeah, and I mean, in previous conversations, you did touch, like it's hard to be what you cannot see. So it is a lot about bringing that representation, isn't it, and making it tangible, because that's what really will get other women inspired and give the confidence and yeah, just get them to apply to things, get them to get into it, just going in. I think that like it's different when you have the role models, you can go in with the confidence that I think when you don't have them, then it's much harder to try to make your way.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I must 100% agree with what you said. I think it's like we have to tackle the topic on all ends. We have to encourage the women to be strong and to be courageous, right? And then we have to go out ourselves and encourage it and make sure that we push women into the right direction. And then we also have to do the education across the board, right? And keep reminding people that it's not like just simply because of the fact that women have the same rights. I think that's clear for everyone. Everyone would just agree and say, yeah, I mean, of course. But what I keep seeing, especially in the startup world, is that it starts very early on. You basically have people who go to university together, and that's usually the buddies already. And those buddies found a company together, which is then 3 to 5 guys. And they are then the founding team, and then it comes exactly to the point where you say, like, where's the space where you can create diversity on this board if it already starts up like this, right? And then making up their minds and really creating the understanding that if the more diverse their leadership team is from the beginning, the more success they will probably achieve. Then I think we can like really make a change also early on already, right? And build up strong organizations from the beginning.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And we talked about this previously about how the difference between shame triggers in men and women. So for men, it's don't be weak. But for women, it's I'm not enough. I'm not clever enough. I'm not bright enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm not enough. And the courage, you mentioned that word courage, the starting point for courage is vulnerability. So anyone in the tech industry, they take a risk, they have uncertainty, they don't know what's going to happen, but they'll make that plunge and they'll go for it, and that involves leaning into vulnerability. So from a masculine side, it's actually, it's really courageous to admit that you don't know, and to admit that I don't have all the answers. And by having a diverse board and diversity around me, I might learn something, and that takes courage to be able to move out of the way and say, I'm not the knower here, and I'm the learner. And yeah, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at leaning into not knowing, and encouraging diversity through the fact that I don't know, and accepting that. I love that.
Yeah, that is super powerful. I do think, kind of like we all definitely go through those thoughts and those feelings. I was just, like in Instagram, just looking at the post yesterday, somebody's, like kind of like talking in front of an audience and kind of like saying like, I may have no idea what I'm doing right now, but I'm still doing it. I'm courageous. And I think it's also that acknowledgement that we all feel a little bit like that, inside. And when you speak actually with your male counterparts, they also feel the same. So I think it's also like that acknowledgement of like, we are all of these with kind of like these fears inside together, and just that idea of like working together and leading with empathy just kind of like removes a little bit that pressure.
100%, and I think it's once we all like lean into that, it means that we need to acknowledge our privilege and get out of the way to encourage that diversity. And yeah, it's both sides.
So can you touch, I mean, I found that interesting, that phrase of making space or getting out of the way. So can you speak a little bit more about that?
So I'm thinking in the perspective of the leadership boards that are in place already, and really doing deep inner work in the context of how do I make space for diversity in my team. And when I'm talking about diversity, I'm not talking about the optics, but also diversity of thought. Because my ideas or my way of thinking with my background, if I hire people that are like me, then I'm going to create that consistency of a board that doesn't think differently. So I need to be vulnerable to have someone, have a team alongside me that is absolutely not like me, which means getting out of the way, which means creating that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for us that are, working in tech, in mobility as well, I think it's also that, I mean, my background is on design, so it's also that thought that if we want to come up with products and experiences and solutions that are gonna actually make a meaningful difference for everyone in the world, is like we need to acknowledge that diversity on the world and in the world. And obviously the way of actually being able to reach everybody and bring that positive impact to everybody is, as you say, it starts at that level, and bring in that diversity in so we can design and create products that are going to be reaching that diversity.
And I think that links perfectly back to what Romy was saying about education, educating people on why having a diverse board or a diverse leadership team is important. And it's not to tick a quota, or it's not for, like you say, Sarah, the optics. It's about creating a pool of people who come from different backgrounds, have different experiences and think differently, will actually in turn lead to higher performing teams and a higher performing company. So it's the right thing to do. I don't think any of us will disagree. Giving everybody equal opportunities is the right thing, but also from a financial perspective and an economic perspective, diverse teams are higher performing teams. It's proven time and time again. But I think educating people on why that is and why having these brilliant diverse minds in a room together is key. And I think where Romy mentioned, yes, you have founders, and there's no judgment on these founders. If you're 3 people or 4 people at university who are really good friends, and probably you do come from a similar background and you have an amazing idea, do it. We're not saying don't do it, but then when you go to build on your management team, that is the time, right at the early stage, to make this decision to build a diverse team around you. So don't then go and hire the next 6 people you knew at university. Go and hire different people. I'm certainly not saying that networks are not important. They are. They're hugely important. And I think we're testament to this sitting around this group. But go out and look for people who are different. Go out and look for people who will challenge you. And I guess that's the topic of today, right? Choose to challenge and, challenge yourselves. But in our positions, I think we have to challenge the people that we can influence. And for me, in my world, that's a company that come to me and say, we want to add a new board member, or we want to build out our executive team. And one of the key things we look at there is how do we make sure, not that making the exact decision on that person that they hire, because that isn't my responsibility, but my responsibility is to educate them on why they should see a short list of extremely diverse people and why they should consider them all for their own merits and not just look at a prescriptive list of skills or experiences as because that worked before. That's not the future. It's not the way that we should be building businesses. And I think once we get to a point of people understanding that from an education perspective, then we will see a big change.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you made a good point here on we have to challenge ourselves and challenge the others, right? We have to understand that diversity is an effort that we have to make. It first of all costs us more time and more looking into it, and like really challenging ourselves, because what we naturally, I mean, I'm gonna hire people who are similar to me if I don't challenge myself, right? Who have similar interests and who I just like love to spend my whole day and evening and everything with, right? Go on vacation with, because it, in the first place, it feels more comfortable, right? So I think this mindset shift is also incredibly important.
And also,
really, oh, sorry, go for it, Abby.
If you can't convince someone that a diverse kind of senior level board is a good thing, you can make it a business issue and bring it back to profits. And like you said, Jenny, like the evidence around companies that do have a more diverse, more women on their exec boards. There was some research came out last year that showed that women companies with lots of women on the board would make like 10 times as much profit as companies without. And you hand that to your senior leaders and say, you know, this is some evidence, this makes complete sense. So even if they don't see it as a let's do the right thing, they can at least see it from a profit point of view.
Absolutely. And I mean, it was, yeah, so it was, I think, this McKinsey report that you say, you know, it was like something like gender diverse companies were 21% more likely to outperform competitors. And then even more people, well, companies that have diverse teams. So again, just kind of like reaching to that range of traits, experiences, and backgrounds, that then makes them 33% more likely to outperform competitors. And it's really, I think it's just that, sorry, go for it.
That kind of research, it quantifies the benefits and actually shows the evidence. But when you, the same piece of research actually, this is a horrible statistic, but it showed that in the top FTSE 350, there were more men called Peter as the chief execs than there were women in that whole 350 group. So it also not only shows you the benefits, but it shows you the distance that we've got to go at the same time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'll go on, Michelle.
No, I was going to lead into the next topic, but before I do that, I'll let you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it feels all the more stark in the current context, you know, with against the backdrop of the pandemic, with ONS releasing statistics yesterday in terms of how much more adversely affected women have been, and how so much of what the last year has brought, obviously, huge sadness and bereavement and stress and anxiety to a whole host of families, but that how women have been adversely affected in terms of being 3 times more likely to have to stop work or to be at risk of redundancy. And I think just to echo Abby and Jenny's point, you know, some people will immediately engage with the moral argument, which is that diversity is important, and of course we should build diverse organizations and get out of the way, as Sarah said. But fundamentally, the kind of business argument is so compelling that if you feel like you're sort of not being heard on the moral imperative to actually build diverse leadership teams, then showing those business statistics is a very, very good way to persuade.
Yeah,
I'd also,
and I mean,
Sorry, Michelle.
Yeah, and I was just gonna tell to Nikki that she completely read my mind into kind of like jumping into our next topic, which is kind of like the state of gender imbalances in the workplace. And exactly, I mean, 2020 has been a year like no other. We have, you know, on one hand, we have the Black Lives Matter movement that, you know, brought positive impact and change into diversity and inclusion initiatives, which was great. But on the other hand, we have the global pandemic, which, as you say, Nikki, just really hit us hard in the progress done for women and for ethnic minorities in the workforce. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that. So where do you know, like a little bit elaborating, I guess, on what you were saying, Nikki, where do we stand now after 2020 and COVID-19?
My God, that's a big question. I mean, on a personal level, I'm exhausted, and I think women across the country are exhausted. It's been incredibly tough. And I think what is concerning are those statistics coming out at the moment, just in terms of the number of women who are being affected in terms of their day-to-day job and having had to take the time off. Obviously, that's against a climate already of a recession where there are redundancies, there's furlough, there are people who still don't know whether their job may or may not be at risk, and how time and time again women are being more adversely affected. And organisations like Pregnant and Screwed are out there campaigning for women who have been made redundant because of pregnancy, and there've been more cases of that as well in the pandemic. So, I mean, I think it's such a big question, isn't it? You know, where are we on gender equality post-pandemic? You know, I do feel that people who are saying that we're harking back to the 1950s aren't being alarmist. They're probably highlighting a very real truth. If you've got more women having to do the majority of the homeschooling, the housework, the childcare. I know I joked that I felt kind of the tyranny of the endless meals. You know, there's been a lot when you've been kind of confined at home. Lots of people haven't had kind of fit for work workspaces, and then fundamentally we just don't have enough women leaders of large companies. You know, Abby's statistic is, you know, that to hear that, I hadn't spotted that, but to hear there are more Peters than there are women, that kind of really says it all in terms of the state of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this pandemic goes to show, you know, I was reading a lot, again, there's been a lot of articles on how if women have been taken a more active role in decision making on how to handle this pandemic, maybe things wouldn't have been so bad. But there was, I think, a lot of alarm at the beginning, like, you know, like obviously men, this disease tends to affect men more in like the physical impact. But then I think when it comes to policies and decisions on how to protect women, then there was really nothing for the women. And as you say, you know, like childcare, responsibilities at home has just really taken a big toll. And I think it, as I said, it just shows the importance of women being able to shape those policies and those responses to cater for us.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
I was just going to say it's probably a slight sideways step to the conversation, but kind of where you mentioned around women forming policies, something that I'm privy to in my job every day is how people have been treated by their organizations in the pandemic. And there's certainly no kind of major generalization, but what I have found is people with female bosses have in the main felt more supported and had those more kind of open dialogues. And a huge reason for people looking for new jobs, whether or not that they have been furloughed or made redundant, but just generally, is how flexible organizations have been. I'm not a parent myself, but speaking to a huge number of people who are, without flexibility, life is totally impossible. And there's people who are expected to still be doing, I would say, the same, if not more work than they were doing pre-pandemic, because there's an expectation to be working in that time that you were potentially commuting. But if you have young children or children you're homeschooling, it's absolutely impossible. And I think those companies who recognize that and offer flexibility and leniencies and make life easier will come out with a much more determined workforce, a much more committed workforce, and actually I think will come out of this in a much stronger position than those that have taken the kind of archaic, well, these are your working hours stance on it, because it's just not possible.
No, it really isn't possible. And that piece around paying for the unpaid work at home, you know, so to allow the space for people to recognize that when you are working, i.e. preparing dinner or housework, that those gender roles, they lean so much to women, and for them to then go for the leadership roles, the senior leadership roles, where they perceive that I can't do this, I perceive that I don't have the bandwidth because I'm running a home, and if I'm running a family, then how can I be expected to run an organization as well if we don't have the systems in place to allow people to have time for themselves? Then yeah, it's something that needs to be addressed and talked about openly and honestly.
Michelle, I was going to add, of course, is that because the gender pay gap data was cancelled last year and then this year has been delayed, we also don't have the data. Obviously, that's only one data point, and I know we could debate for a long time about kind of the efficacy of that data, but it's an important snapshot in terms of understanding the pay gap and between men and women, and how organisations are progressing against that, as we don't have that national data. And I'm very glad that they haven't cancelled it completely this year, and that there'll be an additional 6 months. But that is a really important insight into understanding what steps are organisations taking. And in fact, my personal bugbear is that it's one thing to ask the organisations to report, which I think is great, but then there's no compulsory action plan and kind of accountability on the steps they're taking. So, you know, there's a lot of noise generated, and we see what's going on with, say, EasyJet one year or another company the following year, but then we're not able to go back and track, well, these are the policies they put in place, and this is the result of that action. So again, it's very difficult to really gauge, you know, what is the state of employment for women in the UK, sort of pre or post pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that, for example, in OS2, you guys did publish your stats in 2020.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm a big fan, you know, like of the work that, because I know, you know, I worked with you before, and I know you've actively been there reducing that pay gap year after year. So yeah, I was wondering if you want to give us a little bit of a snapshot of, you know, like how you've led that fight in OS2 and the results that you've got.
Yeah, so I guess to give an overview, over 4 years, we reduced our pay gap from 13% to around -1 or 2. So that's positively in favour of women. And that partly is reflective of the fact that during that period, I was made managing director and part of the leadership team. So it was a kind of small percentage change, I guess, in my favour. But I think one of the things that's very important to me is that we've always strove for equality. So it's not that we suddenly want a female-dominated organisation. We're just looking for an organisation where men and women hold equal voices. And I think it's, you know, I do acknowledge that the gender pay gap has its limits. It doesn't account for those who don't identify as male or female. And additionally, it doesn't also account for race and ethnicity, which is an important part of how we, you know, collect data. And certainly OS2 in the last year has made real steps to look at how can we be closing our ethnic pay gap as well. I think that's an important part to be reporting on. But some of the steps we've made, I mean, I think I've spoken about this before, you know, I've asked the question of do the organisations really care, or are they just playing lip service? I think there's something about, you know, filling in a form or putting your data in, but actually it takes investment. I think, as we said earlier on, like, it costs money to change the makeup of your workforce. Like, there's training, there's investment, there's more effort in recruitment. There's sponsoring or investing in organisations that particularly focus on supporting underrepresented groups finding jobs. So there's a whole host of legwork that you have to put in order to be finding harder to reach people to bring into your organisation. So I think step one is, like, how much do you care, and how much money are you willing to put behind investing in creating a more diverse workforce? And then second of all, I think you just have to continually maintain focus on it. You know, I was pretty dog-headed, for want of a better word, about it. You know, I really was intent on us making a shift, and we did everything from organising underrepresented in leadership trainings. We didn't limit that to women only, where we brought in a coach to help people think about how they develop their own brand and goals, but we also exposed them to more parts of the business, because I personally felt that one of the things that was holding individuals back from progression was not actually understanding how an organisation works. So, you know, everything under the bonnet, from the business, the forecasting, how business decisions made. So we opened up our leadership team meetings, our forecasting meetings, our business meetings, to enable those people to attend. And then it was also really kind of forensically looking at salary and transparency. So we introduced pay bands so that everyone understood where they were on their kind of progression journey and could talk openly about pay, and made sure that that was really fair and transparent. And actually very proud that this year we've now included those on our jobs as well, so that all candidates feel they don't have to lobby for a salary, that we're very open up front about what the band is. That really goes a long way to help. And so, yeah, that made a big difference. And then really, as I say, proactively recruiting and being quite explicit. I say even, you know, stepping on the boundaries of sort of proactive kind of positive discrimination in favour of women, or kind of quotas, in that being really clear that if we were bringing in new senior roles, that we would actively recruit for women. And certainly we do have a guideline now that all jobs must be 50-50 shortlist, but also that we have an expectation of a certain number of underrepresented groups in terms of candidacy diversity. So all those steps probably, and kind of a lot of hustle, and having the whole studio company behind us made a really big difference.
I mean, that's amazing. It's really like amen to all of that, I think.
Nikki, that sounds like, so you hear about organizations sort of driving and pushing diversity, and especially you know, during the pandemic, that there's been a real reckoning, hasn't there, for race in particular since last year, George Floyd, but from what you're describing, and it's giving me goosebumps, because it's like the difference between transactional diversity and relational. You know, you're looking at the core of each human being that's in your organization, and you're really speaking to that rather than tick boxes, metrics and numbers. It's about how we work and who you are, and that really comes across as you described that. I remember, yeah, I feel really enthused to hear that, and that's what we need in all organizations, to have that drive to achieve that, so it's not just a tick box exercise. Great, love it.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
The thing that was coming to my head and kind of like thinking on startup world, so maybe a question for you, Romy or Jenny, is like, in startup world, you always are really tight on time, you know, like you're always doing what you should have done 2 months ago, and the pressure is big, you're normally under-resourced, underfunded. So what will be your advice for startups on how we can actually, like, for example, following this great example that Nikki put across, and, you know, like the challenges of, like, as you were saying, you know, like hiring a diverse team is hard, it takes longer, it takes more money. What advice can you give us to make sure that we can do that in startup world, especially those you know, that we may not have like massive funding available to us straight away?
Yeah, I mean, it's true, we never have time for it. What I'm trying to do is bring it to the C-level, to the decision makers, as often as I can, and right away. And then I try to find multiplicators, right? The Women at Tier network is nothing that I've set up. Wonderful women in our organization have set that up before I joined. And the thing that I can do here, because they're doing an incredible job with podcasts and educating people within and outside the organization, I'm their sponsor, I support them, I deliver contacts from my network, I take part of my budget to give it to them, try to help them to do trainings and stuff. And they basically run on their own and educate other people, and are ambassadors for this topic in the organization. And then if you have that discussion on the board, it basically, you have it across the organization, right? And if you have your ambassadors there, you can very well drive it forward. But I mean, for me, I'm impressed, Nikki. It's fantastic. I love it. Yeah, such a fantastic role model organization. I would love for everyone to see that, and I hope you are measuring like the great success that comes out of it and publish that to the outside. It's incredible. I'm super impressed. Our reality is that we introduced tough gender targets, and now that's exactly the point about following through. Now it took us 8 weeks already to basically break them down into org unit individual goals, so the individual teams can follow up on it, right? Because we just don't have time. Yeah, we have to scale and have to serve the business, and at the same time we're always trying to do this. We're gonna do it, but it takes a lot of time. Yeah, that's absolutely the reality, and that's exactly also with flexibility. Maybe one more point, what you said earlier, Jenny. We actually say we are very flexible as an organization, and people can work from wherever, and everything is so amazing and so flexible. But then following through and really creating the room for people, yeah, to have the time and to spend the time with their family, that's key, right? Like how do you design the job specifically, and can you really prioritize and make decisions on what is important right now and what can wait, right? To really have people like taking care of what they need to do right now, instead of like working day and night.
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on. That I think that really resonates. I think with probably, you know, some of the challenges that we, I think, definitely go through as startups. And I mean, we are running out a little bit of time. So, you know, there was a thing more we wanted to discuss on this topic, but I just want to quickly jump because we've been obviously talking a lot about what can we do from a policy point of view, and you know, like, and putting, you know, like things on the workplace to make sure that we, you know, make this space and allow, you know, this diversity to flourish. But I think community is important. And Abby, you've been working a lot on that space of community in Sky. So I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about, yeah, what's the effect that community can have, especially in such a big corporation like Sky.
Sure. So at Sky in the UK and Ireland, we've got around 25,000 employees. We set up a network in 2017, it's called Women at Sky. So it's immediately exclusive of men trying to help us and drive the journey forward. So what we've been working on over the last 3 years, thinking back to when I started in the lead in the co-chair role, we had about 1,000 members and 3% were men, and we've managed to grow that by 8 times in the last 3 years. But that still means we've only got about like 250 men out of sort of nearly 2,500 people. So it's a big jump. What we tend to focus on, what we used to focus on before was, you know, thinking about women, a safe space for women, progression, you know, building women's confidence, giving them negotiation skills. And there's a lady called Aviva Wittenberg-Cox. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. She runs a consultancy called 21st. It's a gender balance consultancy, and she's absolutely fantastic. And we took a lot from her. She talks about being gender bilingual rather than focusing on being gender blind. And also that we should stop trying to fix the women and stop trying to blame the men. So if you're actually trying to get more men on board with you to drive your journey, especially somewhere like Sky where, you know, 2/3 of the senior executives are still men, without people at senior level really pushing this stuff, you won't get very far with it. You need to be top down. So now we have much more of a focus on gender equality for all. So that's that's our vision basically. It's for everyone. We don't want to exclude any gender, including men. We want men to come and help us to drive this. Our exec sponsor is a man. We have a working group of around 18 volunteers with solely women. We've got 3 men on that now. So it's looking much more to the outside, that it's not just the women's job to fix the issues at Sky.
Absolutely. And I mean, we talk a lot as well as the role of men as allies, isn't it?
Yeah, so we launched a Men Allies program in 2018, and we got Robert Webb from Peep Show in to talk, so we thought he'd be a great draw for men, and we saw like 40% men attending that versus maybe like we might get 1 or 2 previously. And so what we've enhanced that to be now is more of an allies program, is to understand that, you know, people, you don't have to be a man to be an ally. Women should be allies as well. When I think about having 2,500 people on our network, I'm super proud of that. That's still over 20,000 people that are apathetic or don't understand that there's an issue or don't know about gender inequality or don't think that it applies to them. And so that education piece, like we talked about earlier, is really, really important. And so we're trying to do more of that to bring on everyone to be an ally. Like ideally, the network would not exist, and that would be the ultimate goal for us not to exist at all. But until we've got everyone's buy-in, that's not going to be a possibility.
Absolutely. Any more thoughts on the role of community and the importance of it on again empowering women into leadership roles?
I'm happy to jump in. I guess we've only been going as an organisation for 18 months, and my key role outside of what I would call my day job of executive search is building our community. And within that, we use the power of community to showcase women and people from, I guess, mostly looking at people who have moved to the UK to show what's possible in a career where you move. One of the things we found actually of interviewing women there's a huge number of female leaders who have moved geographically, and I found a lot more than the men that we've been speaking with and interviewing. And I think through the power of using a community to showcase people, you actually inspire other members of the community to get involved in action. And I think linking back to what Abby was saying there, once you start to build a community, it takes momentum. And what you see is that filtering out into people who previously would not have had exposure to the issues. And I think that actually links back to Romy's initial point that you can use a community to educate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, there's still, I mean, we were discussing, I think, before, you know, that we wanted to touch on other topics, especially, you know, like the sticky topic of quotas and so on. Unfortunately, we have probably just 5 minutes before we can take some of the questions the public is submitting. So does anybody want to give like a really quick thought on quotas, just, you know, like an initial thought so that we don't not touch on it before we take the first question of the public? Sarah, would you like to go for that?
On quotas, so you say quotas, I say it's perception. If we're looking at encouraging diversity for women, people of color, then I think it's important to recognize, well, this is what if we're looking at gender balance, you do need to look at the numbers. And if there is a gender imbalance, then that needs to be addressed. And if that means we address that with quotas, if that's what's needed, then you can call it a quota. I think it's about creating balance and shifting the organizational culture away from a numbers game, but a relational game.
Absolutely. And I think that takes us back to everything that we've been discussing, you know, like that making space, creating all those policies and you know, the transformation that Nikki went through. And I think it's, again, you know, like making the space and getting those, you know, female in those positions, but also creating that, I think, that feeling of belonging and that feeling of people being heard and people being empowered to take decisions and shape things. Thank you so much.
I think I'd add, oh, go on, Romy, sorry.
Yeah, maybe just one more point. I mean, to run our businesses, we set goals, right? We set strategies, we set goals, this is a business goal, right? A business goal is to create diversity in our organizations and on the management board, and we should take that serious. For me, it felt weird when I was young, and when I started to tackle the topic, I was like, no, you don't need quotas, right? That's ugly, yeah. But I'm 100% convinced that and I wouldn't, quota always sounds a little like, ooh, but we have to set proper goals for ourselves to know where we want to be in the future, and we also, by the way, then have discussed why we want to be there, right? And I think that's so incredibly important to have that. Every organization should have that, and watch it and mirror it and measure it, and move towards it.
I was just going to say, I think quotas can be a good way to overcome, you know, cultural differences. You know, last year, I think it was November last year, Germany announced quite a historic moment that they were going to introduce quotas on management boards, because they actually lag behind their top 30 companies. Only 12.8% of those companies have women on boards, whereas the equivalent, say in the UK, would be around 22%, and the US about 28%. And so I think sometimes you need the quota to force the issue. It doesn't fix things, right, immediately, but I think it's a good way to deal with another attitude, which I think we have to tackle, which is like, well, if we have diversity, will we have to lower our standards? The immediate assumption that kind of diverse candidates somehow are kind of going to lower the quality bar. actually all it involves really is just more hard work. You just have to look a little bit harder, but the talent's out there. So yeah, I think quotas can be a good way of perhaps addressing kind of cultural legacy issues, and I wish Germany much luck in changing the composition of their top company boards.
Thank you so much. I really wish, like we had more time to continue chatting, because this has been like really, really inspiring and really, really interesting. But let's now take some of the questions of the public. We have quite a few questions coming in. So I'm going to read the first one. So it says, brackets, white men can often be hesitant to get involved with diversity issues, perhaps because they feel as if it is not their place to talk about these issues. However, if the system was or is built for men by men, are they not the ones who should be championing the change as owners of the system? Abby, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So that's, yeah, interesting. It kind of goes back to the who's in charge and who's going to lead from the top down, is having kind of it's the men that are making the decisions. We need them to drive stuff. It isn't down to them though, and it isn't down to the women either. I think it has to be a joint effort. But for me, specifically at Sky, we did find it's the women leading the charge to try and start to fix things, and not getting very far because it is just the women sort of banging their heads against a brick wall. And without bringing men on board to not just to help, but to actually sort of co-lead these things, you start to see the step change, I think, when you do bring the men on board.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely men have a role to play. Right, I'm going to go with question number 2, which says, I find it hugely helpful having women in leadership roles in the business I work in, particularly to help when I do face challenging situations. Do you think mentorship still plays a key role in developing future leaders, and have you benefited or experienced this? Sarah, I see you putting your hand up.
100%. I don't think anyone can get into leadership without support from someone else, whether it's a mentor or a coach, but working with somebody else and spending time with someone else to hold up a mirror to yourself. If you have the luxury of having a mentor, then bouncing off their experience and bouncing off their own journey is really powerful. And I think with an organization that wants to address gender imbalance and more women in leadership, for them to invest, and we talked about this earlier about putting your money where your mouth is, and that is also investing in your pool that you have at the moment, to enable them to get coaching. You can't do this on your own, and I obviously am biased, but everyone that I've ever worked with, my clients, they would never have done that without support from a coach.
Absolutely, so important, isn't it? I think it just opens that safe space to actually like discuss many of the things of, how are you feeling, the challenges that you are facing, and that realization that, again, is a lot of people have gone through this journey and have felt and faced the same challenges that you are, and there's a wealth of knowledge that you can definitely learn from and help you grow in that way. So absolutely.
Michelle, can I add one thing, just to build on what Sarah said, which is just that we should talk about sponsors and champions as well as mentors. Because I think Sarah used a really good phrase, which is you can't get into leadership without sort of someone supporting and helping you there. And I think sometimes a sponsor is very different to kind of a mentor who might meet with you monthly and offer kind of informal advice. But in an organization, if you've got a champion or a sponsor, they're in the background kind of saying, you can go for this, I'll help kind of unlock the pathways. And so I think all of that's really important. I would say that I absolutely wouldn't have got to where I have without having had sponsors as well as mentors.
Abby, is that, for example, in Sky, which I think is like the scale of Sky is really big? Is that something, for example, that happens there?
Yes, very much so. So there's no sort of set kind of framework for trying to get a mentor. It's quite informal originally, and now there's like the mentor loop, which you can actually kind of matchmake people via. It's interesting you say all those words. Actually, we've got part of our International Women's Day celebrations, we have the Women at Sky Awards. They're actually like coming up in 1 hour, and we've got Deborah Francis-White coming to present them. And we have a champion award, a mentor award, a change maker, and a rising star. But the champion and the sort of sponsor type awards, they're definitely like men and women. So it's not just kind of like the Women at Sky Awards all for women. We've been really specific that it's open to all. So we very much celebrate that kind of role that people take on within Sky.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, really, really important. And again, just looking at the time, so I'm going to probably take the last question here. So we have, do you have any advice for new graduates that are just starting in the workplace? Jenny, would you like to take that one?
Sure, and actually I think I'm going to take the opportunity to link it back to the last question. And I think to reiterate what Nikki said, I wouldn't have had the career I had without some amazing sponsors and champions. And actually I got into the recruitment sector at a time that it was hugely male dominated. And actually to this day, I've never had the privilege of having a female boss. So my sponsors and champion have all been men, and also, as was probably the best mentor I've had, although I, just to a nod to Sarah, the only coach I've had was a female, and she was absolutely amazing. So my advice would be to look for those people, and don't have your blinkers on and only look for a woman. I think it's very, very important to have females in your network or in your community that you can lean on, and that perhaps you feel comfortable sharing some things you might not with others. But look for those sponsors and those champions, or a male mentor who can help you along the way. And I think, Michelle, you touched on a safe space, and something that I found with a mentor was someone that perhaps I would have initially found relatively intimidating at the stage I was in my career. But when set up right, it gives you that opportunity to have a safe space and to probably to share your vulnerabilities and to be inspired by someone. And I would say they are the real key things to focus on in your career, is looking for those people that can support you along the way. And I think you'll find a lot of those people, when you do have a senior male mentor, probably take a lot from it themselves, and it gives them a push to look for how can they bring the women through the organisation, and makes them feel more included in discussions like this.
Absolutely, super interesting. Right, as I said, I really would love to kind of like, I have loads of things in my head I would love to keep chatting, but yeah, I think we've come to the end of this, and I can just say thank you so much for all of you to be here today and to give us your time and your knowledge. It's been really, really inspiring. Yeah, and I think I just want to close by saying that I feel extremely lucky and extremely privileged to be having these conversations here today with you. I think it's really a gift. I'm originally from Mexico, and I think the fight over there and in Latin America is still the fight is not around leadership, it's still around like gender violence and kind of like staying alive. So the importance that these conversations have is kind of like, the more we push, as we said, women to leadership roles, the more we can shape policies and laws, the more we can actually give that role model in other countries, in other areas, to get that inspiration and actually get women there making that tangible change, even in basic things like life and rights. So this has been like really meaningful and really inspiring, and thank you so much for your time all.